The policy that we have requires body cameras to be activated in certain circumstances. If I may refer to the policy, it's in terms of when there are traffic stops and executions of warrants, which doesn't apply in this situation. Interactions where the officer is dispatched to respond to a call for assistance, which would apply to the initial interaction. So when he gets out of the car, we would expect that he would turn on the body camera where reasonably prudent, because the policy also states that the officer is not required to activate the camera where it would jeopardize his or her safety. And I want to go through the other parts of the policy where it's required and then explain a little bit about the safety issue first. It also requires officers to activate their body cameras in situations where force is used, and that would be covered where an officer draws a weapon and points it at someone, so that would apply to the interaction with the young man. It requires officers to activate their body cameras where they are investigating or enforcing violations of the law, which would apply here, and also where recordings are not required but a situation becomes adversarial. Now, as I explained, the policy does not require the officer to activate the camera where it would jeopardize the officer's safety. And so the officer, that's where the facts in this situation become really important to understand. The officer was, as I explained, on his way to assist a canine officer. He wasn't involved in an active pursuit of the suspect. He had heard the description of the suspect, where he last was, and they were going to try to find him in this area. And so which was only a couple blocks away from where he ended up having this interaction with the young man. When he saw this young man matching the description, he was running near where the suspect was seen shortly before. And as I described, he had a look of panic that came on his face. His eyes widened. The officer he's got his lights and sirens on. And so, and the young man stopped immediately when he saw this. And the officer described he had a look like he started looking around like he was looking for a place to flee now that he saw the officer. And so because of the report that the suspect was armed, and as I explained earlier before, the reason the officer thought this might be the suspect, when he gets out of the car, he's expected to draw his weapon for his own personal safety, to be ready so that he can respond with the firearm if that's necessary, because the suspect was reported to have a firearm. So when he does that, he's immediately getting out and at the same time drawing his weapon for his protection. And in so doing that, he neglected to activate the body camera. And so it's his position that this was all happening very quickly. He was drawing his firearm for his own safety, and it wasn't expedient at that moment to activate the body camera. And things then happened so quickly, and he was able to determine so quickly that this wasn't the suspect, that he didn't ever end up turning on the body camera. The policy does require that, if feasible for the officer's safety, that the camera be activated in those circumstances. And so there are several situations that applied here and that would have required the officer to activate his body camera had it been feasible for physical safety for him to do so. And then it's his position that it was not feasible because he was pursuing an armed suspect, and this is who he thought might be the armed suspect, and the most immediate need for him was to get out, make sure the suspect, who who was reportedly armed, did not flee away into the neighborhood with a gun and then to protect himself in the event that the suspect retrieved his or her weapon to use against the officer. So the exception then would apply to relieve the officer of the obligation at that point under the policy of activating the body camera. It's important to remember, I want to make this clear though, because it's really important for the public to understand. We have requested that an investigation be done by an independent investigation be done by the state into whether there was any criminal conduct by the officer, whether the officer used the appropriate amount of force, whether there was any racial bias or profiling that occurred, and whether there was a violation of policy. And so one of the things that the state investigators are going to be looking at is whether the officer violated this policy under the terms of the policy and the situations that applied. So the city is eagerly awaiting the results of that investigation and is not going to take any action one way or the other until it receives the results of that investigation, because it's important. We've asked for the investigation to be done, and we will honor the results of that investigation. And we want the public to understand that we will act in accordance with the results of that independent investigation. The officer's position is he did not violate the policy based on the reasons that I've explained. The city's position is based on the information it has so far. It does not find a violation of the policy at this point, but has referred the matter to the state for a full and complete independent investigation. And based on what the results and conclusions of that investigations are, will determine at that point whether there has been a violation of the policy, and if so, what action to take. The officer has been placed on administrative leave with pay, as is standard protocol when we have investigations, criminal investigations that are taking place. And so the officer will remain on leave until the results of the investigation are complete. And once that is received and reviewed, then determination as to what those conclusions are and what action, if any, to take as a result will occur at that time. The policy that the city has is provided by a national agency that drafts policies that are in accordance both with local law and best practices throughout the United States. And they're extremely well respected and used widely throughout the United States. And so there is a high level of confidence in the policies that are put out that it will strike a good balance between what is important to the public, the needs of the police officers and their agencies, and the local laws that are enacted by the local legislatures. There were no other officers that were around for whom there were any body cameras. So anywhere between, I don't want to say anything that's wrong, so it was anywhere between 15 seconds and a minute that this occurred, and there were no other officers that had body cameras activated. And because of the quickness of the situation in which it unfolded, that's why there were no other officers that were there. We have forwarded the information that we had at the point that we requested the investigation to the state investigators. They will take that information and follow through on the information that is provided and develop whatever other information is out there and learned, including interviewing witnesses, obtaining documents, looking at recordings, and will assess those in making its final determination and then providing the conclusions to us.
And you say looking at recordings, is there witness video?
I'm not aware of any video that records what happened, the interaction between the young man and the officer. There may have been a recording that was taken after it was over, but I'm not sure about that because it came about as we were making this transition. So, but I do know that the city's not aware, based on what it has, that there is that anyone recorded what happened in the interaction between the officer and this young man.